Hey, welcome into This Week in Indiana Football, Rutgers edition. I'm your host, John Alden, aka John the Producer. Along with me, as always, the walk-on turned scholarship superstar Mitchell Page and Joe, the law firm Lincoln. Missing, as you can probably tell, is our friend Dustin Schutte from Outsider.com. He may join us later, he may not. Either way, that's fine. We'll find a way to get his picks and stuff for next week if he isn't able to participate in today's festivities. But yep, another disappointing week for Indiana. It seems like every time I come onto this, I blame it on the fact that I started this podcast. Every year before I did the podcast, I always wanted to do an Indiana football podcast. And in 2019 and in 2020, I was like, it would have been so fun to do an Indiana football podcast. They're doing so good. In 2019, they beat Nebraska. They got 8 wins in the regular season. Got to play Tennessee in a bowl game, even though they lost that game. In 2020, they, shocked the world in the first game of the season with Penn State and the pylon dive. And we all know how the rest of that season played out. And so I was like, yeah, an Indiana football podcast would be awesome. And so, the expectations come around in 2021. And everyone's talking about, can they challenge Ohio State? And obviously, we all know how 21-21 played out. And here we are in 2022, and it's more of the same. All of the expectations that had been accrued over the past couple of years throughout the Indiana football program, gone with the wind. And I'm disappointed. And I know there's one person on this podcast more disappointed than me, and that's Mitchell Page, the alumnus of the football program. So I guess I'll start with you, Mitchell. We don't have to talk about the season as a whole. Obviously, it's not a complete wash just yet, but what are your thoughts and feelings on what's transpired this season?
Yeah, I think it's been really disappointing to not get some of the wins that we could have gotten. What are we sitting? 3-3. So we're still now. 3-4. So we've lost 4 in a row, but we're still – we've won some games that we shouldn't have won. We beat Illinois in maybe the biggest miracle of the last 10 years. Illinois is going to win the Big Ten West. They're the best team in that conference.
But who would have known that? And that's – Indiana wouldn't – if they played Illinois next week, they'd get the doors blown off of them.
100%. I agree. But to do that, come back, show some fight early, I think that is – when we were doing that and we weren't really winning games easily, we never really controlled games, and I don't think we've controlled a game all year. But early on, there was a lot of fight, and you could tell that we maybe weren't as talented, especially as we've been in the past, maybe 2020, 2019, or 2018, whatever that year was. But there was some fight. Last year, we lacked fight. We got beat by Iowa by 50, but even the next week we came back and fought. It feels like, and we always go back to this one play. As soon as Micah McFadden got ejected against Cincinnati, it seemed like the life of the program just evaporated. It really hasn't felt like there was any real fight to the team, and I'm going to keep using that word because I do think that there's some talent. You see guys like Deshaun McCullough, Cam Camper. Those are guys that would play at any school in the conference, maybe in the country. Those guys are really good. But then you've got so many things that happen over the course of the game. Blown coverages, missed assignments, blocking. Finally, we got some holes open on Saturday, and it just didn't feel like we were hitting – things just weren't timing up. And it just feels like we're one step forward, 2 steps back. Finally, we started blocking somebody on the offense. I thought the offensive line did way better than they had previously. It felt like Bazelak had some time to get settled. I won't say he was extremely accurate, but I thought there was some life. I even tweeted we might have been in rhythm for some of that game, maybe. And we hadn't had that all season. And finally, you get the offense that's starting to work. You're starting to get the 3, 4, 5, 6-yard plays that keep drives alive. And then you give up huge plays on defense. Or you just have silly errors on offense where you throw it to the other team. I mean, the horrible interceptions. You have a fumble that, and I'm sure everyone listening to this will point to the fumble, be like, oh, well, that was the biggest play of the game. It was, but that's an effort play. Those kinds of plays are going to happen. Obviously, you want to have ball security. You want to tight to the chest, but I mean, that's a guy that's trying to win the game is what he's doing. He's not that one I didn't have as big a problem with. Still had a chance after that. We weren't down and out of it. We fought a little bit to get a chance back, but it just is. It's hard. It's hard to really describe.
It's hard to win football games.
It's hard to win.
I can't remember who I heard say this the other day. Maybe it was somebody on one of the shows that I do.
It was me, probably.
The hardest thing to do in sports.
Winning.
The hardest thing to do in sports is to win football games. Was that you?
Winning is hard, man. Yes.
No, but you just say winning. Somebody specifically said the hardest thing to do in sports is just win a football game.
There's so many things that have to go right. When you look back at a game, there's however many plays, call it 200 total plays, offense, defense, and special teams. And when you look back, it really feels like 3 or 4 plays are what win the game or lose the game, especially when you're in conference play. It's just little critical errors, and Indiana just has so many critical errors. You can get away with 1 or 2, but it just feels like they're blowing coverages, they're missing assignments, they're throwing it to the wrong team, they're fumbling, they're getting taunting penalties that who knows whether it should have been called, but you just can't do that. You're a veteran. You understand the game, the time, the situation. Just can't do that. It's silly. And it just feels like it's been that for 7 weeks and all of last year. And I would just like to see the ship righted a little bit. And it starts at the top. That's got to come from the head coach. Got to come from the captains of the team. The guys that are on the field making the plays. That can't come from a kid that's on the bench or from us. It has to come from in that locker room. Something's got to happen. And who knows? Maybe it's one guy getting up there and saying, we're done with this. We're not going to, you guys suck 1 week, we suck the next week. We got to learn to play off each other. And that starts at practice. And honestly, it started this morning. So hopefully they had a good day. And I guess we'll see on Saturday. That was a lot of ways to say we just are infuriating.
Joe, you seem like you have an optimistic personality. Do you think Indiana has what it takes to right the ship in whatever form that may look like? And that someone's definition of righting the ship can be something totally different than what my definition is. But what do you think? Do you think they have that ability in them?
So when you're talking about righting the ship, I think there's a lot of different ways you can go with that. I think if I'm thinking about Indiana football and the year they've had so far, maybe 1 to 2 more wins could be righting the ship a little bit, getting some momentum going into the next season. That'd be a good place to start. You're not going to fix everything at the end of the season. That ship has already sailed, obviously. That sailed with the Nebraska game. And, they've kind of tried to pick up the pieces after that. But, I wanted to go back to something that Mitchell touched on. The fumble obviously was a big play in that game. People are talking about that being the thing that cost the team. It's never just been one play this season. It's always a combination of not being able to play a complete game on both sides of the ball. We said that in their first 3 games of the season, they've had good aspects on special teams, offense, and defense. It's just so disappointing to see this team not be able to play a full game of football together. I think if they're able to do that towards the end of the year, whether it be Rutgers or Purdue or, obviously the Ohio State game is going to be a really tough one, and so is Penn State. So I think that probably the 2 games that I said prior to those are the ones that you have to focus on really and say these are the ones that we can go out, gain some momentum, have some really good offensive and defensive production. And, there's so many things that need to be improved on at this point. I don't know if you can do it all in 1 or 2 games. Obviously, that's pretty much impossible. So I don't know what they need to focus on at this point, but I do think that if you're talking about righting the ship, there are things that you can start with and you can start implementing maybe different things into the game. And, it's just, there's a lot of stuff that needs to be fixing, but starting small and kind of trying something maybe different than what you've done this year is a good place to start. Don't know if that's going to happen, but obviously Tom Allen has showed in recent weeks that he's willing to make changes to try and make this team this year better, which is great. You want to see that in your head coach, but not really translated to the field yet. So that's what I'll look forward to in the next couple games.
And speaking of changes, some people during Saturday's game were saying that there maybe should have been a change at quarterback at some point during that game. And little do we know, the day after, yesterday, we find out that Indiana's primary backup, Jack Tuttle, says he will be entering the transfer portal at the end of the season, which I didn't realize, excuse me, that he still had eligibility left. Obviously, it's because of the COVID year. But I find it interesting, too, and maybe more players do this than not, but if he's going to be in the transfer portal, he's still playing on this year's team, correct? Like, he hasn't left the team. So can he still play? Is that like, if you put your name in the transfer portal, can you still, be put in a ball game? I don't know how that works.
I don't know how it works either. I've never seen it. Generally, when somebody goes in the portal, they're done. But they've made it very clear he's still on the team. I think he's still listed as the backup. Which
it's like saying, hold on, I gotta pause you before I lose this thought. Yeah. That's like saying you're going to get divorced and you still live in the same house as your wife.
We're going to get divorced, but not till next year.
Yeah.
We're going to act like everything's the same. We're going to just continue to do this, but then next year we're done. It's very bizarre. I don't know why you would allow that to happen.
How do your teammates respond to that? Like, do you sit there and say, hey, you should hop in there with me?
Yeah. I mean, you can't. There's no way you can. I think he's a captain of the team.
Yes.
Voted by the players. How can you send that kid out? I mean, there's no way you put him in the game. Why would you put him in the game?
Yeah, there's no way
it adds nothing to your team. So I don't understand. There must have been in the conversation. I mean, I've seen a lot of those conversations. I've had that conversation where you get you're never going to play here, which is, I assume, what may have happened. If he stuck around this long, I think he was still hoping outside chance that something would happen. I think Allen is upfront enough to be like, listen, dude, if you want to play, it's going to be somewhere else. We're either going to go with this other guy, Bazelak, or the young kid. And I can never remember that guy's name. But
Dexter Williams?
Yeah. And it doesn't even really add to how weird this season is. It just kind of exists in the weirdness of this season. You don't really know how to explain what's going on inside the doors of the program.
Yeah. You said something that intrigued me. You said you've had one of those conversations where someone said you're never going to play here. Are you talking about while you're at Indiana?
Yeah, we'll get into that.
All right, I want to hear that.
We'll get into it. So, I mean, I was a walk-on and bum, essentially. I was
Catholic.
Yeah, I'd been there for 3 seasons, and I was coming to practice, and I traveled to every game, I think, except for one, even as a true freshman. And I don't know if you know how it works. Like, the whole team doesn't travel to the game. Mm. Only 70 guys make the trip. So that's 15 scholarship guys right off the bat that aren't traveling. Wow. And for some reason, I went to every game except Bowling Green my second season.
And the road game?
Yeah, we lost.
Yeah, good thing you didn't go to that one.
No, I didn't go to that one, but I couldn't really understand why I was going to these games. It was like the third string punt returner. They would have put in a defensive back before they put me in a receiver. So that's a whole different conversation we can have. But after my third year, they were honest. They were like, listen, you've given us a lot. There's just guys. We're just going to keep recruiting guys that are on scholarship, and it's our job to make sure that they're at least better than you. And we've done that. And that's what recruiting is. Every year, I don't care if you're Bryce Young or the worst player at Indiana. It's the coach's job to go find somebody that's better than you. He doesn't owe you anything, and you don't owe him anything. Once you get to school, it's an absolute business. So those kinds of conversations are necessary, especially for a kid like Jack Tuttle that has spent a lot of time on the bench. He wants to play. He wants to ride off in the sunset being the starting quarterback, and whether that's in Division II or 1AA, whatever it is, that conversation's necessary, and I'm sure something he appreciated. It's never easy, but it's not like a bad conversation. Those conversations are happening on every team, everywhere.
So when you finally got your scholarship, was it? I know nowadays, like they always put it on video and it's super fun.
Yeah.
Was anything like that?
No. They just they put like 3 of us up there and we're like, here's some papers. Can you sign them? I'm like, okay, you're on scholarship.
I'm trying to think who might have. I want to see if I can guess who got scholarship the same year you did. Did you play with Ryan Watercutter?
I did, but he got his after I left.
He was after you left. Okay.
You'll never get it.
It was Greg Heben. Greg Heben.
He was before me. Still to this day, best athlete I've ever seen.
Go ahead and give him to me. I don't know if I can guess.
Sean Damaska, Damon Graham, and I think Ricky Brookins.
He was a running back, right? Ricky Brookins?
Yeah.
And I remember Damaska, was he a lineman?
No, he played tight end. He started on a lot of the special teams. He was like 6'9". He was a basketball player and was freaky athletic, but just, I don't know.
Did you play with the guy who was also a basketball walk-on, Jordan Fuchs?
Yeah. Yeah, he was a tight end. He scored a couple touchdowns my senior year.
That's pretty cool. Just curious. I always forget which players line up with each roster and whatever. So I was trying to make that connection. So, yeah, now that we've gotten off topic, talking about the gloomy things away from Indiana football, I guess it's time to dive back into that. So, Indiana takes on the Church of Chop, as we've referenced all season long, the Rutgers Scarlet Knights on the road at SHI. Is it SHI Stadium or is it pronounced Shy Stadium? Has anybody heard them say the name since they've renamed it?
I've never even known the name of it.
Because it used to be High Point Solution Stadium, which is a mouthful, but
all I know it as is the birthplace of college football.
That's right. Those BTN commercials that go ahead and always show the different iconic parts of each university. It always puts the birthplace of college football next to Rutgers. That's the only reason I know that.
Huge letters right behind the end zone on one of the sides of the stadium.
That's legitimately their only calling card.
It takes up way too much space. They've
leaned into that.
Yeah, they have to. It's the first college football game ever. If we had that, I would hang it from a flag and put it on a banner in Assembly Hall.
What is Indiana football's calling card in recruiting? Like, at least for when you were there. It might be different now, but what was it?
Hey, Joe, I saw that laugh. Don't laugh.
I was gonna say The Rock. You're just like, you're coming for The Rock.
No, I think so. The big thing that if we could get recruits on campus for a weekend and they just hung out in Bloomington, that was it. That was it. We didn't even.
Joe, why did you go to IU?
Man, long story. So I started out at Western Kentucky, your alma mater.
That's right.
And that didn't work out all that well, obviously. And my parents are both graduates of IU. I grew up and a huge IU basketball fan, obviously. And, it just seemed like a cool place. I love Bloomington. So, Mitchell, there's definitely some grounds there. That's just all you need to do is get a guy to hang out in Bloomington for a weekend. It's a fun time. It's a great place. So that's definitely something they can keep in their back pocket. I mean, this place is just awesome.
Yeah.
Now that I've had enough coffee, I think I can let this guy in. He doesn't have a hat on, much like Joe doesn't have a hat on. It's our other co-host from outsider.com. He's returned the
Am I too late? Am I too late?
No, you're just
we're 20 minutes in. We've been trying to avoid the doom and gloom that is the current Indiana football team by talking about other football related topics, in a sense, things that have naturally come up, thankfully.
There we go.
There we go. He's adjusting his camera.
He's got his finger over the speaker as well.
There you go.
Are you doing this on my phone? And I
have you had some adult beverages tonight?
Photos, those family photos where you're like looking the opposite way away from the camera. That's how I feel right now. I don't even know where the damn camera is in this thing. Keep talking.
Dustin, have you had some adult beverages tonight?
No, I was. I've had some other stuff happening. It's been a nightmare day. So
Okay.
Well, welcome.
thank you.
Welcome
We
to
missed you.
this
I'm going
week
to
in
go back.
Indiana football.
I'm going to go back to this way because that way I can actually look into the camera.
There you
I
go.
like that better. We were talking about why would you go to Indiana, and my reason was like if you're a recruit. My reason was you get this is our big thing when we would get recruits on campus, hanging out in Bloomington. I haven't been to every college town, obviously, but it's pretty hard to beat that one. Bloomington's a pretty good city. You can have some fun there, especially as a football player. Things are pretty good, just as an athlete in general. So that was number one for me. I'm curious what your number one. If you're a coach trying to get a kid to come to Indiana, what's your number one?
What's my number one?
Yeah.
Oh,
Elevator pitch me.
I don't know if I've been on the campus enough.
Okay.
Mother
Well,
Bears is awesome.
Well, let's anything you want. We'll broaden it back up. Doesn't have to be campus related. I'm recruit Joe Lincoln. You got to convince recruit Joe Lincoln to come play football at Indiana.
Boy, this is tough.
I play wide receiver.
I don't know. I don't know that I would have a pitch. I would just
You'd
take
be a
him.
bad coach.
I would exactly. This is why I talk and criticize other coaches and recruiting tactics because I don't know how to do it. I would just take him around. Like I think Indiana is probably the prettiest campus in the state. So getting them on campus is important. There's a couple of good restaurants like Zagreb's. I
was just
Mother
there.
Bears.
Place is
Were you
great.
really?
I was last week.
Nice. So I know there's a lot of really good, and there's a lot of stuff to do. So I don't know. To me, it's just getting them on campus would be probably the number one priority, which is, I mean, that's recruiting 101. So
Yeah.
But I've not been on the campus enough to really make a pitch. I mean, you could be. And by the way, I don't think Indiana has a ton of trouble recruiting wide receivers. You would
Why
have.
is that?
Don't you think the offensive line is a bigger problem?
Yeah.
No, I agree. But
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
a wide receiver. I thought this was a recruiting pitch. I'm almost convinced.
You're almost convinced to go somewhere else is what I think is happening.
Yeah, I mean, if you're an offensive lineman, I think the pitch is, hey, do you want to start in the Big Ten the second that you walk here? Because
I bet that was the reason Dason McCullough stayed on whenever everything was going south. The only reason Dason McCullough stayed, even though his dad went to Notre Dame, was you were going to start day one versus Illinois. That was probably what was. I mean, obviously you have to earn it, but surely the coach can still say something like that.
oh yeah, and I think if they were truthful about the depth chart, I think Dason McCullough is the number one at like 4 positions as well.
True.
He plays linebacker. He plays D end. He plays in that position that Marcelino Ball used to play. What the heck do they
The
call it?
bull, or the
Yeah,
husky, or the
Husky.
bull. I don't know.
he plays one of those. He probably is a starter at both of those. The kid is. Speaking of Zagreb's, I saw him at Zagreb's.
Marcelino.
No, Dason McCullough.
Oh,
He is huge. I didn't realize how huge that guy is. He's at least 6'4". He'll fill out a little bit,
He's
but
bigger.
oh my gosh, he's a problem.
I'll tell you what, it will genuinely surprise me if he doesn't enter the transfer portal. And I'm not saying he's going to. I don't know what his thoughts are.
Yeah.
But the only reason he would stay, I guess maybe there's 2 reasons. Obviously, he grew up when his dad was coaching with Kevin Wilson. And so he has those childhood memories of being around Indiana and that kind of stuff. So there may be kind of a nostalgic connection there for why he's, went there in the first place, for one. And then the other reason is obviously he's going to get playing time his whole career. That's the other reason. Unless he has a desire to win a national title or just, play in a better bowl game, I don't see why he wouldn't have a desire to get into the transfer portal. Did I
Unless he
just
wants
say
to
that
accomplish
backwards?
something, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that was.
You just gave some pretty good reasons as to why he should enter the transfer portal.
Well,
I'm not gonna lie.
maybe I said that backwards. So
I would argue this. Is there a team, and maybe I'm not as up to date on all these guys on all these different teams. I'm sure there's good players all around the country. But let's just stick to the Big Ten. Is there a team in the Big Ten that he wouldn't start on right now?
I don't know what Ohio State's depth chart looks like, but I don't know if he would have started there immediately.
I think he would.
Right now, after like 7 games, you see the body of work. He goes to practice on Tuesday of this week. Knowing what he knows, is there a team in the Big Ten he doesn't start for?
Oh, you mean he just transfers and can play immediately? That's what you're saying.
I think the answer is emphatically no. I mean, he's one of the best players in the conference.
Yeah, I have to agree with you.
So that's a problem for Indiana's prospects, I think.
So hey, we'll see. Let's say if he stays, it's because he wants to stay. That's initially what I was trying to say earlier.
Oh yeah, that's a personal preference as opposed to a business decision.
Because we already know his younger brother, Dave McCullough, who was committed to Indiana at one point, decommitted and is now going to Cincinnati. So neither one of them, interestingly enough, going to Notre Dame, where his dad is. So obviously there's not like they don't have to be around him kind of thing, which is very uncommon, honestly, in sports. It doesn't have to be football. It seems like a lot of their sons typically play for, and it probably helps the fact that they're not running backs. I think that'd be a different story.
Yeah. Here's an interesting question to me, at least. Would you rather be on a bad team at Notre Dame or on a bad team at Indiana?
A bad team at Indiana because you're probably still playing as a freshman.
Let's say you're playing at both.
Plus, here's the thing. If you're bad at Indiana, people just shake it off and then they forget about it. If you're bad at Notre Dame, everybody knows you're bad. That's the difference.
That is actually a good point.
Yeah. Yeah. Where would you rather be? Like, you're playing at Notre Dame, but you're both 3-9. Like, neither of you are good.
Is Notre Dame 3-4 right now? I haven't paid attention to them since they lost to Marshall.
3-3. 3-3.
Wow.
And their prospects of winning is about as good as Indiana's. They are unless they play. Do they play Navy? I don't think Navy's very good.
They play Navy. They have a couple games that they can win on that schedule. I think they have UNLV coming up, so that'll probably be a win.
Yeah, UNLV's not very good, I don't think.
Hey, UNLV, just their band got in trouble. Did you guys see that?
No, what happened?
That was San Diego State.
It was UNLV Air Force. The band was playing, like, this was in the third quarter when the game was pretty much over anyway, but the band was playing in the third quarter when Air Force had the ball during snaps, and the official during a timeout walked up into the bleachers and walked over to the band and was like, "You can't play. You can't play when they're snapping the ball." I don't know why it took him the third quarter, and Air Force was winning like 35-7 at that point. So, but I don't think I've ever seen that before. I remember one time I was at a Purdue Indiana football game at Ross-Ade Stadium when Jerry DiNardo was the coach.
That's early 2000s.
Early 2000s. And the Purdue student section started throwing stuff at the IU sideline.
I remember this.
And Jerry DiNardo stopped the game, and the officials said, if it does, they came over like the intercom and said, if it doesn't stop, we're going to escort the sections out one by one until it's empty, and then we'll proceed with the game. I've never heard a stadium boo louder.
Wow. That's
hilarious. So good. I love that. All right, that was a good hiatus. See, that's good stuff. I'm not convinced to go to Indiana yet, but Dustin, next week, that's your job.
I'm going to come up with
You're going to have a 5-minute pitch why I should come to Indiana in its current state.
I got you. Who am I recruiting against?
No one. I want to come to Indiana.
Okay, well, this is going to be should be.
Yeah. So just don't
Dustin, before we
like John did earlier.
What is it?
You need to leave.
You can literally have everything and everything I said and more at every other school.
No. All right, back to reality here.
Oh, yeah. Dustin, since you weren't here, we'll get your thoughts on this, and then we'll probably go ahead and jump into Pick'em since we're trying to get out of here at a decent time. But, Dustin, I asked Mitchell and Joe, and I gave my thoughts. What is what can Indiana do to right the ship, and what does righting the ship look like at this point in the season, if it's even possible?
I don't know if this is going to be a popular answer among us four or not. I don't know what righting the ship looks like, but I think at this point you are just looking for improvement. It's been so bad. Like if you can provide some sort of consistency, I don't think the offensive line is going to get much better. Can Connor Bazelak eliminate some of those really dumb throws? Because for a majority of a game, I think he's pretty good. But when he's bad, he's really bad. And it costs Indiana quite a bit. Like I was vehemently against people who said that, and still am against people that say they need to find another quarterback or, give Tuttle or as Dexter Williams, right? Give him time. I still don't think that's the answer, but he's maybe not as consistent as I thought he was. I put a lot of that blame on the offensive line. I think he's got a little bit more to blame. So maybe see some consistency out of him, be competitive. And then I think if you can finish 5-7, because I still think I think you can beat Rutgers. And I think Michigan State is a team you can still beat too, especially if you're throwing the ball well on that given Saturday. I think if you can get to 5-7 after going 2-10 last season, having some winnable games, you should have beat Maryland. You should have beat Nebraska. If at least you get to 5-7, I think you go into the offseason with some sort of momentum, some sort of confidence. But if you finish 3-9, I mean, like, then the pressure's on. Everybody's talking about Tom Allen on the hot seat. And it's a different conversation. Like 3-9, if you need to make staff changes, it feels like it's going to be pretty hard to bring people in because the head coach's job security is going to be in question. If you're 5-7, you might look at that as in a different light and say, okay, maybe I'll get 2 years here. They were so close last year. Maybe I can be the missing piece. I feel like that's something to me that's how I would look at it. So I think it's pivotal that Indiana gets to 5 wins, but at this point, you also just want to see some sort of improvement. And by the way, the most concerning part to me of that game was the fact that they won with Taulia Tagovailoa going out and the backup quarterback Edwards not completing a pass, and they scored 2 touchdowns.
They were way better when he was in. Tagovailoa was awesome.
Yeah.
I was super impressed with them, and they got better when the other kid came in.
Yeah.
And I do want to add on, we can go to Pick'ems real quick, but Dustin, you bring up a great point about what it looks like as you look back on the season. 5-7 looks better for one reason. Even 4-8 looks so much better for one reason. If you go 3-9, you lost 9 straight.
Yeah.
Good point. Yeah.
That's a problem. That you look back, like we haven't won since the middle of September or whenever they're second. Like we haven't won in forever.
Right.
You've got no momentum. It's doom and gloom until spring ball.
At that point, you could almost look back on Tom Allen's career as a whole and say that each of his teams relied so heavily on one form of momentum. When things were going good, they were going really good. But when things were going bad, they were going really bad. You could almost say there's something within the way that he gets his teams in a certain mindset that when things are going wrong, everything just has to go wrong and vice versa. And it's an interesting case study that obviously none of us are qualified to dive into, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting thought. And then one more thing I want to ask you, Dustin, just because it was an interesting topic that we came up or were talking about earlier. Jack Tuttle being in the transfer portal, but still being on the team.
Yeah, that's bizarre.
What is that about?
I don't know. That's bizarre to me. Okay. Let me see if I can make this point clear because it makes sense in my head. I don't necessarily hate the idea of him sticking around for the rest of the year from a personal standpoint. Like if they have a good relationship, if he's still committed to playing at Indiana this season, I can understand that part of it. But the message that sends to the rest of your team, like that guy is basically saying, I want out. And the message it sends to your other backup quarterbacks, like I would rather have a guy who's 1 foot out the door already taking snaps than I would our third and fourth string quarterback. Like, I just don't think that's a good message to send to your team. Like, if it was like I said, I don't necessarily hate it from a personal standpoint, but from a personnel perspective and a mindset, it's like, imagine if Connor Bazelak gets hurt and then you see Jack Tuttle in the game. Like, I would be so pissed if I was Dexter Williams or anybody else. Like, this guy's giving up and he's getting a chance to play. Come on.
I made the analogy earlier. It's like getting divorced to your spouse and living in the same house still.
Yeah.
Some of us, we'll leave it at that.
It's so bizarre. I can't even. I can't even fathom how that conversation, because you have to tell the team. So I'm picturing them in the team room. Alan's like, "Oh, by the way, we got some news," and Jack comes down and says, "Hey, I'm leaving, but I like you guys, so I'm sticking around for the rest." No,
I'm still team captain,
here, dude. I don't. If you don't want to be here, don't be here. Get out of here. And it's honestly best for both parties.
Exactly.
Jack deserves to play. I thought he had some good series. I won't say games, but he was okay at certain times. He deserves to play. He is not good enough to play in Indiana. At least I hope not. So it's best for both that they part ways. But don't drag it on. Let's move on. Let's make sure that if Bazelak, something happens, we put the other kid in. If Tuttle goes in the game, I won't be on this podcast anymore.
I don't think it'll. I think part of the reason for that is the case. I bet Dexter Williams is QB too from here on out if he wasn't already. I don't know.
They listed him as number 3 on the depth chart.
Even for this week? I don't know. Has that changed?
No.
Wow.
See, that Tuttle was listed as number 2. Bananas.
Yeah, well, that doesn't make. Oh, there you go. Then that's an issue. So
that is why. What goes into that? Why would you do that? I mean, that makes no sense to me. Like I said, like a good example of this would be Jim Harbaugh a few years ago before Brandon Peters transferred, and I think it was actually after the season. He allowed Brandon Peters to kind of work out use the workout facility, use all that stuff, but he wasn't part of the team. I feel like something like that is a good enough kind of.
Sorry.
You're good. I feel like something like that would be a good compromise. Like, yeah, you can still use. We're still going to leave on good terms. You're not going to get it done here, but we wish you best of luck. You can still use the facilities. You won't be part of the team. I feel like that's a good compromise. To have him on the team, like I said, if he gets into the game, if I'm Dexter Williams, I'm hitting the transfer portal.
It has potential to implode an already imploding offense. You don't have anybody that blocks. You can't get in any rhythm. Your quarterback is leaving like he should, but you allow the opportunity for him to start getting in other people's ear, get in some of the freshmen's ear. Hey, come play with me. Even though you're not good enough yet, there's a chance you might be good enough. It makes absolutely zero sense. All it does is hinder what you're trying to do. I'm usually not outwardly negative, or I try not to say – sometimes I'm outwardly negative, but I try not to say things directly about the program or about anything that they're doing. This one is the first one where you have to say, like, what are we doing? You cannot allow that to happen. It's just too big of a risk for not really any reward. There's no leadership on offense anyways. So what are we – he's the captain of what? Captain Crunch, man. If my sister is listening, she'll love that one. That made me laugh. That's going
to be on Dustin's Instagram later this week.
It will be Captain Crunch. Yes.
All right. With that being said, let's move into Week 8 pick'ems. I apologize. Lily is barking at something, and I have no clue what it is. Hopefully, nobody's breaking into my house. I am the only person here right now, so I wouldn't put it past anyone to break in at the moment. So, if so, we'll see my murder live on air.
What's the weirdest radio voice about somebody breaking into your house?
Yeah,
what do you mean radio voice? It's not like a monotonous commentary with no emotion.
It just sounded like you were closing out a big story. Like, it would not surprise me if anybody was breaking into my house. right at this moment. It's like something straight out of Family Guy.
There you go. We have officially gone off the rails, and I'm doing it again, aren't I? All right. Before I get into my own head, let's get into this. First up, Iowa and number 2, Ohio State. OSU 29. Oh, and I've done it again. Joe, before we get into this, give us the updated standings.
Yeah, so from bottom to the top, Joe Lincoln is now your leader in the clubhouse, surprisingly. Don't really know how that happened. String of luck. Then after me comes Dustin Schutte. Then Mitchell and John are tied at the bottom, but we are all within striking distance of each other. I will say that right now.
Yeah, we've been shuffling each and every week. I don't feel like we've had the same leader
That's not true.
For consecutive. Well, Mitchell, you consecutively had leads for a while.
I've been in the lead every week.
No, you
Thanks
haven't.
a lot,
Has he really?
Every week I've been in the lead.
Okay. Well, things have changed.
I was smoking y'all, and now I'm just giving it back up, which is fine. So who plays now? Iowa.
First up, it's Iowa and number 2, Ohio State. OSU 29-point favorites. Over/under set at 49. Let's try to keep these quick if we can, since we got to get Mitchell out of here. Dustin,
around the horn, baby.
What was the spread again?
29, Ohio State.
I think Iowa covers.
Yeah,
Mr. Lincoln.
That's too much. I was going to cover that one.
Bucks. Blowout.
I have Iowa covering as well. I picture a score of like 28-7, which would, seems very Iowa-ish. So
this feels like another way for me to get in last place.
There you go. Hey, at least, well, no, Nebraska's not on this week. So don't you always pick against Nebraska?
Always.
Well, you don't have to worry
I will
about
until the end of time. So that's been pretty much 2 auto losses for me because I pick against Nebraska and for Indiana, and Nebraska is just good now apparently, and Indiana is, whatever.
All right. Purdue at Wisconsin. Wisconsin is favored by 2.5, and the over/under is set at 52. Dustin.
I was really hoping Purdue would be favored in this game, because then I'd take Wisconsin.
You always think Purdue's not going to do well for whatever reason.
They haven't beat Wisconsin since 2003.
That's a long time. Holy crap.
It is a long time. I hate this game. I'm going to pick Purdue because I think they're the better team, but it wouldn't surprise me if Wisconsin won.
That is a long time. I had not heard that stat. 2003. That's a while. I'm going to ride with you. I think Purdue's going to break that streak. I think they're better this year than they have been, so I'm going to go with the Boilers.
Where is this game?
Wisconsin.
Badgers. No,
I think Purdue is, and I don't know if they still have any of the injuries they've been dealing with, but this may be one of the worst Wisconsin teams we've seen in a while. Correct. And the one that Indiana beat wasn't very good, and this one probably is similar caliber. I think Purdue goes into Camp Randall and covers and gets the victory. So there you go. Moving forward, Northwestern at Maryland. Maryland only 13.5-point favorites. That kind of surprises me. Over/under set at 51. Dustin.
They're only 13-point favorites because they don't know if Toledo.
Oh, that's.
I still think that Northwestern is that bad. I'll take Maryland to cover.
Yep. Said it a couple weeks ago, and Northwestern is really, really, really bad, and they're still that bad, even with Maryland's backup. So go Terps.
I think that they got better, as I said, when the backup was in. So, yeah, Maryland to cover. Would Indiana beat Nebraska or Northwestern, you think?
Yes.
Yes.
Oof.
I think they had like the fact that they beat Nebraska is just a set of week 1 syndrome, just like Indiana and Illinois.
No. Nebraska was horrific with Scott Frost. Let's not forget.
But that's the thing. Scott Frost isn't there anymore.
Yeah. Okay. Well, they have new life in the program. Remember that whole 10-minute beautifully worded rant that I went on last week? You get a new voice. They're saying the same thing, but just it ticks a little bit different. And now all of a sudden the same players are good. Scott Frost was a poison, and now they got the poison out of their system, and they're good again. I just wish they could have waited a couple more weeks.
I wouldn't say they're good. I would just say they're good enough in the
Serviceable.
Big Ten
They
West.
fight. Yeah. Yeah, they compete.
Anyway, I do think Maryland covers Northwestern. I hope Northwestern goes 1-11 with their only victory over Nebraska. That'd be pretty funny. In Ireland, nonetheless. So, moving forward, we're going to go ahead and do Indiana at Rutgers before we get to our game of the week. Rutgers favored by 3 points with the over-under set at 47.5. And we will, as always, give scores for this one. Mr. Shooty.
The over-under is 47.5. I wonder where those points are coming from.
Yeah, I was wondering the same thing.
This is tough. I actually do think Indiana's going to win this week. I'm going to say Indiana 21, Rutgers 17.
That's funny. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Joe.
I'm close. I'm gonna go Indiana 27, Rutgers 21.
52-3, Mitchell. Come on.
Yeah. Well, I'm debating, and it's not that. 30-27 Hoosiers is what my heart tells me. Doesn't matter what my brain says.
Dustin, I don't know why you and I are never on the same page for Indiana for some reason. Because I have the same score as you with the opposite winner. I've got Rutgers winning 21-17.
We all seem
I
to be
do think if Indiana loses this game, their record will be 3-9. I think this is that game that obviously Nebraska kind of was the game that set the spiral in motion. But I think this would be the game if Indiana can't pull it out that buries them for the rest of the season. So hate to bring out the death toll, the death bells, whatever you want to call that for this week. But that's kind of where I'm at right now. But
I agree.
All right. Our game of the week, Minnesota at number 16, Penn State. Penn State favored by 4, coming off a blowout loss to Michigan at the Big House. Over under set at 45. Dustin.
Penn State's offensive lines are god awful, or their offensive line and defensive line are awful. I think Minnesota's going to gash them. This feels like a very, very Minnesota type game for them, where it sets up very well. They don't throw the ball well, but they won't have to. So even with Tanner Morgan out, I think he's going to be out. I'm going to pick Minnesota to win this game.
John, what's the spread?
4 for Penn State.
Wow. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and say that this is actually going to be a bounce back game for Penn State. I think, last week was a wake up call for them to say that they're not as good as everyone thought they are, and maybe even what they thought they were. But I still think the run game is there. I think they can run really well, even though they don't have that offensive line. I think Nicholas Singleton has one of those games as a freshman that people are just like, wow, this kid's that good. So I'm going to go ahead and take Penn State to cover.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think getting beat by Michigan like they did tells you that you're bad. I think it's more Michigan's just really good, and they wear on you. They're really big, they're really physical, and they have good running backs. And they're going to do that to everybody, it feels like. And I haven't been very impressed with Minnesota in the couple times that I've watched them. I thought they had a chance to be one of the better teams in the Big Ten West, and I think they fall right in the middle of the pack in a not very good Big Ten West. So I think Penn State rolls pretty easy, and we're not sweating at the end of this one. Penn State to cover by a couple.
Yeah, I think Penn State's going to have a case of the angries after that loss to Michigan. And I don't know, for some reason, I just feel like Penn State's that team, and I know they're not the only team that's like this, I'm sure, but they have that home crowd that can help them in situations like this when they need a win after a bad loss. So I'm taking Penn State to cover this.
Look at these past couple of years when they lose a game, though. It spirals out of control. I don't think James Franklin is as good of a coach as we think he is.
I tell you what,
talk about forever.
James Franklin, I guess I could say something like this. Now that Scott Frost is gone, he's probably my least favorite coach in the Big Ten. Are we allowed to say stuff like that without?
I don't dislike him. I used to think he was like the best coach in the Big Ten. I don't know that he's anywhere close.
I hate hearing his stupid little Big Ten Network things because he always has to give a super detailed reason on why he likes his steak cooked rare or some crap like that. You know what I mean? Whatever it is,
I love
he
it.
has to go into in-depth detail about whatever the question is.
It's probably why he's a good recruiter. I'll take lessons from James Franklin when I try to convince Mitchell to come to Indiana.
Yeah, there you go.
My favorite one of those ever, at least from this year, was they asked the coaches what the most overrated statistic in football was. And Kirk Ferentz, I don't know if he was joking, but he said offensive yardage. And I just thought that was hilarious.
It was pretty fun.
Well, I mean, I will. The only thing I'll say about James Franklin is every time I see him in a press conference, it always feels like he's talking down to whoever he's talking to. And that's just a feel that I get. And I think that's one of the most telltale signs of a bad coach. When you don't talk to somebody as if you're lucky to be talking to them and they're lucky to be in your presence. Like, I think Nick Saban, he is above everyone else. He's the greatest coach of all time, or one of. And even in his press conferences, he takes every question so seriously and really thinks about everything. And the way that he says it, sometimes stern, it's never like, you're dumb for even being here. I never get that feeling. And James Franklin's kind of opposite. And I think there's even times when Saban has said, you're dumb for being here. And that's the words that he uses, but it still doesn't feel like that. And that's, since he's gotten the job, he's had all kinds of talent. He's always got a reason for why they're not good. And he still talks down to reporters. They're firmly in the second tier of the Big Ten. And I think they have been since he's been there. They've had some of the best players in the conference in the past 20 years on their team, and they've never threatened anything. I don't think they've been good since the Rose Bowl time. So, that's it. I got the finger wave from John.
That's mainly for Joe. It's mainly just to let him know to play the outro music. So, there you have it. Another week of This Week in Indiana Football, where we have to be doom and gloom about the Hoosiers, but find ways to talk good about other things about Indiana football. So
I do want to say this. I didn't get a tweet last week. So
we got YouTube comments. We got plenty of YouTube comments saying #free Mitch.
Now it's time for some Captain Crunch. Tweet it at
Captain
Crunch. Tweet it at Mitchell. He wants to hear from you on Twitter. So thanks for listening as always. Thanks to Dustin for coming in, even though he had some stuff going on, and Mitchell and Joe as well. And with that being said, we will see you next time.